Alright, hey guys, this is Thursday, April 16th for biology. So I hope y'all all did well yesterday on your test. Today we're going to move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 21. What I need you to do before we get started is to read pages 427 through 432. So 427 through 432, and then you can pause at this point and I'll come back and pick it up with you in a second. Alright, so on page 427, you have this deals with variety in the world of invertebrates. So invertebrates means without a backbone. And so here we have, it talks about the mollusk first. It says the largest group of water animals on Earth is the mollusks, which includes such soft-bodied, boneless creatures as clams, oysters, slugs, snails, squids, and octopuses. Mollusks are distinguished by a muscular foot, which is used for locomotion. They have a visceral hump, which contains the internal organ, and a mantle, which is a skin-like organ that covers the visceral hump, and in most species produces a calcium carbonate shell. And so the muscular foot, which is used for locomotion, and there is a visceral hump, which contains the internal organs, and then a mantle, which is a skin-like organ that covers it. So the mantle covers the visceral lump, which contains the internal organs. You get skipping on down, it gives you a little bit of information about the different types of mollusks and things like that. We're going to skip down to the bivalves, two-shelled mollusks. It says the two-shell valves of clams, scallops, oysters, and mussels give these mollusks the name bivalves. And so the important thing there is it's two shells. Edible clams, scallops, oysters, and mussels are often called shellfish. Next is shells. Each shell of the bivalve consists of three distinct layers: a horn-like outer layer, a crystalline middle layer, and a pearly inner layer. The inner layer of some inedible oysters and clams is called the mother of pearl. This brilliantly colored mineral deposit is used for making buttons, beads, and jewelry. And so that gets you page 427. On page 428, it gives you a survey of the animal world. And so you can just read through there. It kind of breaks down the different types of invertebrates and vertebrates that we've covered, some of them. And so that's just a good comparison contrast chart right there. On page 429, continuing on, we have the definition of a pearl. It says the sheets of nacre build up around the irritant and eventually form a pearl. And so what the nacre is it's secreted by, it's thin sheets that are secreted by the invertebrate and the substance from which the pearly layer is formed around the foreign object. And so basically these sheets just pile up around and keep piling up. And then as they build up around, they eventually turn into a pearl. And so that's your definition of pearl. Your next definition there is the adductor muscle. It says the two shells of a bivalve are connected by hinges that look like small teeth and are held together by two very strong adductor muscles. These muscles are the main parts of scallops and mussels that are eaten. The entire body of oysters and clams, including the visceral organs, is commonly eaten. Next is locomotion. It says a clam uses its foot for burrowing very quickly into the sand. The clam then pushes its foot into the sand, which forces blood to the end of the foot, causing it to swell and form a hatch-shaped anchor, and then shortens the foot to pull itself down into the sand. Not all bivalves have this foot. Scallops swim by rapidly opening and closing their shells, and oysters are immobile. Feeding and respiration. One of the most critical activities of a bivalve is the movement of water into and out of its mantle cavity, which is the open chamber in which the gills are located. This is accomplished with two siphons at the back end of the animal. The incurrent siphon takes water into the mantle cavity to the gills, where oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged. Most of this water then passes out through the excurrent siphon. Dead organic particles in the water stick to a thin mucus layer on the gills and are constantly moving cilia on the gills, move the mucus to the small mound from which it moves through the rest of the digestive system. The other systems there, you can read through that. I'm not going to go through that verbatim with you. Just make sure you have that covered with other systems. The next is edible bivalves. Edible bivalves, although clams, oysters, and scallops are popular and nutritious foods, they can be dangerous for man to ingest because they are scavengers feeding on dead organic matter, which often becomes contaminated. So you have to really check your beds really close kind of understand what it is they're maybe feeding on. It says next one is a gastropod, which is a stomach-footed mollusk here on page 430. A gastropod, which is like a snail, slug, wellets, abalones, notches, dowries, and murexes are often called univalves because most of them have a single shell. This shell is usually very obvious, coiled, and beautifully colored or marked. So that's a unicell. Next we have gastropods without shells. Not all gastropods have shells. Slugs are gastropods that look like snails without shells. Some other gastropods have partial shells, like a marine slug called a nudibranch. Includes some of the most beautiful and graceful sea creatures. Economic importance, gastropods range in size from 2-foot long aquatic snails to creatures as small as a pinhead. They can be pests like many land slugs and snails, which destroy crops, or like freshwater snails which carry parasitic diseases. But snails are also helpful because they clean up organic debris, and they commonly serve as food for man, fish, and birds. So body plan, like bivalves, univalves have a foot, a visceral hump, and a mantle. Unlike bivalves, they also have a head that protrudes from the shell. The class name comes from the Greek words stomach and foot, so that's what gastropoda means. The gastropod's belly gastro rests on its foot pod. So the animal moves on the foot by gliding over a ribbon of slime produced by special glands. Many snails have a lid-like operculum at the back of the foot. Head structures. It says the mouth contains a radula, plural is a radulae, a rough file-like organ that scrapes food and carries it like a conveyor belt into the digestive tract. Most univalves are herbivores, but a few are carnivores, preying on fish and other mollusks. The carnivores usually have larger teeth. Next is cephalopods, head, foot mollusks. A cephalopod are considered by biologists to be mollusks because of a similar body structure, such as a mantle, visceral hump, and foot. So that repeated, you should be getting that one out, mantle, visceral hump, foot. But we would not recognize the similarities quickly, so for a cephalopod, they look a little bit different. The mantle appears as an outer body wall, the visceral hump is very elongated, and the head and foot are indistinguishably merged, giving them the same head foot. For example, the octopus has no shell, the squid and the cuttlefish have an internal shell for support, and the nautilus has a beautifully spiraling external shell. Squids, the squid is a torpedo-shaped cephalopod, noted for its ability to move jet propulsion by quickly forcing water out of a siphon. So then it goes through and talks about a couple different types of squid and the way it moves. So make sure you get that on page 431. And then page 432 here to finish up a couple little things. You have the octopus, which is another cephalopod with unique features. It has 8 arms, which are studded with suction cups for catching prey. The Pacific giant octopus may obtain an arm spread more than 20 feet and weigh over 150 pounds, but most species are smaller. And so next is the nautilus, which is the only cephalopod with an external shell, such a marvel of architecture. Each shell consists of a series of chambers arranged in a spiral. And this is important for me. So I don't know, so just make sure you know this right here, because I like math, obviously. So the angles of the chambers are mathematically precise, and they form what mathematicians call a logarithmic spiral. And so basically, if you kind of study that more, basically it's going to follow the golden ratio, which we will cover in geometry. And so a nautilus shell is just very mathematical precise, it's very proportionate to itself, and it's just got a lot of beautiful mathematics involved in it, and it's created by nature. And so that's just kind of really fun and interesting. And so that will basically finish this up for today. What I need to do is page 432 and do 1 through 7. So 432, 1 through 7. And if you have any questions, get with me. But that'll pretty much be our lesson for today. Thank y'all.